And particularly in church, whenever there is a boy, it's always a boy, and then they usually don't do this with girls at all. It's if you're basically somewhat well behaved and can read really well and happen to be in what they view as articulate, they just assume that you're anointed and that you're special. And it's like, oh, because it's like almost like the notion of being a precocious kid doesn't exist. It's either you're regular or you're super special. And I definitely fell into that category. Okay. I pretty much I believed that, Christianity and Christ was the, pretty much that's what I understood to be true for so long. But it wasn't until I got to Rutgers University and when someone explained salvation to me. So I thought it was basically wearing dressed up clothes and being all staunch and whatever. And when I found a place where you didn't have to be all that, I was like, oh, that's all you have to do? That's easy. Because all I had was my grandmother's example, and everything she did just seemed so difficult and arduous. And I was like, who wants to do all that? Not me. And it seems cool. It seems like I want to do it, but if it involves that, I don't want to do it. And when I had an opportunity to be in a charismatic, both theologically and just expression-wise place, I just jumped right on in. And eventually I took on more responsibility. I got into campus ministry. I was on, praise teams, I had more responsibility, took on more responsibility in the organizations that I was a part of, particularly like Alpha and Omega Christian Fraternity, rose up the ranks there and did more speaking engagements, just things like that. And then something happened. I wanted education. I wanted to learn because I felt that I had a call, quote unquote. And to me, I thought, well, I have to learn some stuff, don't I? So I should go to school. And I tried looking at other schools to try to see what I can go. And those were very, looking back now, these were some very conservative, schools and things like that. I didn't really have the concept of that then. But when I moved to the DC, Maryland area, I had some friends who were in Howard University School of Divinity. I didn't know that Howard University had one. I also didn't know what a divinity school was. I just know that, oh, they learned about Jesus there. That's fine. And so I applied and I went. I had no idea what I was getting into. I had no clue whatsoever. And the reality was that I was entering into a space where Christianity was talked about in a more academic way. And I had some exposure to that because my undergrad minor was in religion. So I was already pretty used to talking about religion in a certain way. That wasn't strange for me. And it actually helped me weather probably about a year and a half where other people were like just basically losing their minds in seminary, like literally like walking out of classes in tears from after doing homework. It didn't really happen to me. And it didn't really start becoming a challenge until we got much later. But over time, I began to become more progressive with my faith. And it wasn't like a all at once transformation. It was just as I learned more about where the Bible came from, about how theology is developed, about how all these things work, it just seemed to be common sense to me that, oh, well, that's just how it is. But I learned that most people in church did not think that way as I started to become, the annoying person at the men's group, the annoying person at Bible study, the one that always asked the questions. And I just had this idea that, well, the Bible says study to show yourself approved, right? And I was studying, but I was just in shock that what I was studying wasn't received well. Because again, I did not grow up in church in the same way, so it just didn't, I thought people would be impressed that I was learning. And it came to a point where, and honestly, if you go to a decent seminary, a decent divinity school, within a semester, you probably know more than most pastors, just to be frank, in terms of how the Bible is constructed, how, just all the things that people take for granted that they just assume. You probably know more in a semester. And if you took a semester and stopped, you know more than them. So that, needless to say, posed a challenge. Midway through seminary, I just fell into a huge depression. I didn't know that's what it was then, but it was just difficult. It was very hard, and it lasted for quite a while. And what needed to happen was a lot of therapy, a lot of discussions, and I started to find out more about myself and realize certain things. And one of those chief things that I eventually came to understand was that I was queer. I did not get that. I didn't understand that. I didn't have any context for that. But once I understood it, then I had to do some more unraveling. So the gay stuff, here it is. And so I left the AME church to go to the UMC because after, kind of reading the tea leaves, so to speak, I discerned that there really was no conversation about queer inclusion in the African Episcopal Church, in the African Methodist Church, rather. And I still don't think there really is, in a lot of ways. And so I left to join the United Methodist Church because at least there was a diverse, intense argument. I soon realized that the intense argument didn't mean that things would change. So I ultimately went to the United Church of Christ, which is known for being the more progressive of Christian organizations, all of that. But one thing that I think people often assume, which is not true, is that having the capacity to be out and queer in one of these denominations does not automatically mean that things are better. Particularly in a situation like the UCC, it was still a lot of challenges involved, and ultimately it leads to the part where I just got burnt out more. I was working at the church on Sundays or sometimes other days, and I was, at Howard taking classes, teaching classes at Howard and somewhere else. I really only had one day a week to literally do nothing, and so this depression sank in and more exhaustion, and it led to me eventually just taking a break from church. This is the interesting part. I think when people learn that I don't believe, they usually, it's either one or two things. They assume that it's from the very evangelical, I hate gays, abortion is the worst thing in the world type of Christianity. And it actually was more progressive Christianity. And so when it comes to queerness, when I left Christianity, I knew tons of queer Christians who were out preaching about all the way. And so it really wasn't my queerness caused me to shift and change. But I think I was in a privileged position where I understood enough about Christianity to know that I had different options and places to go. And so I did not have to leave the church, at least at that time, fully to actually, respect my queerness and still be a Christian, at least at that time. And I think that's often pretty challenging for people to hear. It's just like, wait a minute, you were with the God that liked to drink and to party and was okay with sex and all that, then why'd you still leave? Which we'll get to in a bit in there. But I don't really think overall, queerness motivated my transition through the different Christian flavors, if you will, but I don't think it ultimately led to my journey out of it.